Hey there, who's ready for a little bit more common knowledge? The show where I take a look at 10 common Magic the Gathering cards and tell you if they're any good in the Pauper format or not. Let's go with our first card of the day. It's Rubble Belt Maverick. I kind of like this card. Single green mana for a 1/1 human detective. When this creature enters, you surveil 2, which means, well, you know what a surveil is. I don't need to tell you what a surveil is. And then you can pay a single green and exile this card from your graveyard to put a +1/+1 counter on target creature, and you can activate that only as a sorcery. I think this guy's perfectly fine. We saw some decent usage of this guy in Standard. I guess he's still available in Standard, but I think a lot of those decks are less viable. I mean, this was a decent card in the Insidious Roots decks at one point as a thing that surveils when it first comes into play. It puts a couple cards in your graveyard. This guy dies pretty quickly as a 1/1. Either he blocks or gets blocked. And then when he goes to the graveyard, he can exile himself, which removes a creature card from your graveyard, which activates Insidious Roots, which, now you're getting some good value out of that. In Pauper, we don't have Insidious Roots. It would be wild if we did. But I think he's still okay. This is a 1/1 that you get on the board early. It does surveil you a couple. So in a way, maybe dredge decks might want something like this. Being able to exile itself from your graveyard is good extra value, although most of the dredge decks will want to keep creatures in their graveyard to make the Lotleth Giant work better. So he doesn't really have much of a place in the Pauper format, but there's potential. There is potential there. It's really hard to beat those 2 mana mill 4 guys who can also grab a land back to your hand. Like those guys are just so good, and even the ones that are 2 mana that only mill 3 are still pretty darn good on their own. But I think all those cards kind of just end up making Rebel Belt Maverick a little unnecessary at this point. I think you also just have better cards if you want to mill stuff on turn 1. And it's okay, but it's not amazing, and I don't really see the deck that wants it from the Pauper format. So from a Pauper perspective specifically, which is what we do here on the channel, I think we can go for like a 2.8. He's still a good little guy. Just not so much for this format. Rig for War is 1 and a red for an instant. Target creature gets +3/+0 and gains first strike and reach until end of turn. That's interesting. I like the reach part. Red gets reach occasionally just from having archers, and that makes some sense, I suppose. But we saw a card not too long ago that was +2, +1, +1/+0 in first strike, and that costs 1 mana. So having an extra mana, but you're getting 2 extra power and also reach. I mean, this is a pretty solid combat trick, both offensively and defensively. Really good defensively, obviously, having both the first strike and the reach. That'll stop most of the flyers that you really need to deal with. So that's pretty darn solid. I like combat tricks, and I think this is a good combat trick. But I also don't see a ton of combat tricks working in the format. It really is more of like a limited thing that you can play. And I think the surprise factor doesn't work quite as well in Pauper. I still think this is a pretty darn solid combat trick, though, and I want to give it some props. I think I'm going to go for like a 3.2. 2 mana for +3 power, first strike, and reach. I think is a solid amount of mana to spend on a good suite of abilities. That's pretty good. I don't know. Gem Palm Avenger is a card whose art I love, but I don't think I love the card itself. It's 5 and a white for a 3/5 human soldier, but it has cycling for 2 and a white, which means you discard this card to draw a card. When you cycle this card, soldier creatures get +1/+1 and gain first strike until end of turn. That's all soldier creatures. That's interesting. So you could accidentally pump up your opponent's creatures too. I mean, 6 mana for a 3/5 is terrible. You're never gonna feel good spending that. So are you only gonna be cycling this guy? 3 mana for just a 1/1 pump and first strike. I mean, that's not nothing. And you can do that at instant speed, and you can do that essentially uncounterable because there's no stifle effects in the format. Eh, I just don't think you're gonna play this card. I mean, we have plenty of modal style cards. I think you'd probably just end up playing the Eagles over this that can plane cycle, and then come down as a pretty decent flyer that also gives a pump when they come into play. So I think there's probably a little bit more reason to play the Eagles. Well, a lot more reason to play the Eagles than Gem Palm Avenger, but this art is better. I that's just that's just true. This original Legion's printing, man, it's kind of nice, but I don't think the card itself is nice from a mechanics perspective. I think we can go for like a 2.4. Yeah, I'll give it a I'll go higher. I'll say it's slightly better than the average Magic card and give it a 2.6. Cycling abilities are cycling itself is pretty good. Just discarding a card to draw a card, blood token style thing. Like that's great. But I like these abilities when you cycle creatures, specifically because they are pretty difficult to deal with from like a counter perspective. So there is some value there, but it does require you to build just soldiers, and I don't. Soldiers isn't really a deck in Pauper. Probably could be in the same way that knights could be if it got just a handful more decent pieces. But so far I don't think soldiers is really a deck, and it kind of needs to be able to play this card. And I'm not sure if there was a soldiers deck, would you even play this card in it? It's hard to say. Hard to say, but it's not bad. From a score, yeah, from a score perspective, I think 2.6 makes perfect sense. Stop Cold is 3 and a blue for an enchantment aura that has flash. It enchants an artifact or creature. When this aura enters, you tap enchanted permanent, and enchanted permanent loses all abilities and doesn't untap during its controller's untap step. It's pretty good. I mean, that all that text is nice. That is kind of what you want from a blue removal spell. I like that it can hit both artifacts and creatures. Imagine putting that on artifact indestructible bridge, one of the bridge lands. Sorry, it just doesn't untap. What do you want from me? Um, 4 mana is asking quite a bit. I know it has flash, and that's pretty cool. Working on artifacts and creatures also really cool. Don't get me wrong. I think the text box is awesome, but I don't want to spend 4 mana on a removal spell, and especially when it's a removal spell that doesn't actually remove the thing. So if you do come up against some kind of deck that has enchantment destruction, they're playing Thraben Charms or something, you can get rid of this thing, and then you spent 4 mana to just kind of delay them. And delay's okay. Like tempo plays are certainly a thing in Magic the Gathering using blue. I mean, blue does tempo all the time, but I just 4 mana is a lot of mana to hold up to be able to play this, and I don't think you're necessarily going to do that. If it was just a little cheaper, if it was 3 mana, I think we could have a real conversation about it. But at 4 mana, that is a little too much. I think we can go for a 3 on this, but I don't want to go any higher. Oketra's Avenger, 1 and a white for a 3/1 human warrior. You may exert this creature as it attacks. When you do, prevent all combat damage that would be dealt to it this turn. All right. I generally don't like exert creatures, but I like doing the math on exert creatures to just see how well this works. So you got a 2 mana 3/1, and let's say it swings in on one turn and doesn't get blocked or whatever. You don't have to exert it. So you can just do 3 damage the next turn. You can swing in again for another 3. That's 6 damage in 2 turns. Or you do swing in with it and you exert it, which means it doesn't untap during its next untap step. I do kind of like the ability this one gets. Some of them will get like, oh, it gets +1/+1 until end of turn if you do that, and the math just doesn't shake out. This one, you're not so much doing the math because you're only doing three damage every 2 turns potentially, and probably not even that, because if you are preventing the combat damage that would be dealt to it, it's being blocked. You wouldn't do this unless it was being blocked. So you're actually doing no damage. But what is kind of cool about this, no damage to the opponent, I mean. But what is cool about this is that three power for only 2 mana is a pretty solid stat line for blue. This is or for white. I mean, jeez. That's not bad. I don't mind spending that much mana on this amount of power, especially when it having the exert ability. It's going to be able to trade pretty decently with an opponent's creature, but it won't trade because when you exert it, it doesn't have combat damage dealt to it. Now, the problem here is that if you do exert it, you have to just choose that you're exerting it on attack, not on block. And the timing of that really does make a difference, because if I'm an opponent and you say, okay, I'm attacking with this guy and I'm exerting it, I know as an opponent, don't block this guy because I can't kill it. I can't trade with it. I'll just chump or lose my creature. So sure, it does 3 damage to me, but then I don't have to worry about it the next turn because it doesn't untap during the next untap step. Now, unless the opponent has some way of untapping things, like if you have a way of untapping this guy, like I don't know, like you have like the guac and marshmallow pizza that untaps a creature, that could be pretty cool. You put it on this, it becomes a 5/3, and now you're preventing all the damage to it. It almost kind of gets pseudo vigilance in that way. You're playing Glint Hawks and Core Skyfishers to bounce the pizza back to your hand. You're playing the pizza again on the next turn. So even though you keep exerting the creature, it doesn't. It's not tapped. it's never being tapped, and so you can probably do some kind of cool things. Now it is still just a vanilla 3/1 at that point, and even if it's a vanilla 5/3, it's not necessarily doing all the damage in the world, and you are putting a lot of resources to it. Guac and marshmallow pizza, that doesn't give trample. That's not how you spell marshmallow. That's not how you spell marshmallow. It's not gonna work. Yep. Marshmallow. Does it give? I don't think it gives trample. It does give reach. No, just the untap and the +2/+2. Okay. And in any case, I still think that's pretty good, but unless I think you needed to give some kind of evasion in there, or the card just doesn't quite do enough. And I think you're going to have more efficient strategies by playing something like Pack Beast, or just normal White Weenie. I don't know if you really want to splash into green to try to do some kind of aggro thing with that. So it's a cool idea. It is potentially a cool idea, but I don't think it's quite good enough. We'll give this thing a. I'm not just giving it because of the stat line, but I am going to give it a 3.1. Next up is Spring Bloom Druid. I think we did this one somewhat recently. We've definitely talked about cards like Harrow before. We can do this one. 2 and a green for a 1/1 elf druid. When this creature enters, you may sacrifice a land. If you do, search your library for up to 2 basic land cards, put them onto the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. It's a Harrow. One of my favorite cards in Magic is a Harrow. Sack a land, search for 2 basics, put them onto the battlefield, and then shuffle. Now, Harrow, they're untapped. Harrow's really good. These come into play tapped, so it's slightly different than a Harrow. I can't remember what the other card that is basically Harrow, except they come into play tapped is. But it's also not an additional cost, so if somebody counters it, you aren't losing the land. Anyway, Spring Bloom Druid's all right. You could bounce this thing and keep on playing it and getting some pretty solid ramp. You're putting cards in your graveyard, putting lands in your graveyard specifically. And there are some decks that don't mind doing that because maybe they can bring those lands back. The body's not good. I mean, you're spending 3 mana for a 1/1, but it is a body that stops things or potentially swings in if things are open. So I don't hate it. Are there decks that really use? I know there's some standard decks that use this right now. Also, it's nice to see we get another one of these cards that is all green. Doesn't happen super often. And, it's transient that this happens at all because these cards will not stay in standard. But currently, this card is available in every format on Scryfall. That's always fun. I like Bloom Druid. I think I like it a little bit more for commander decks than I like it for pauper decks. But I mean, there's certainly value here. You're getting you're deck thinning. You're taking 2 lands out of your deck to potentially get you to more gas, and that's not bad. You are ramping. You are putting stuff in your graveyard. There's a lot of stuff that this thing can help with that can further some sort of game plan, whatever that game plan may be for you. But it's not bad. I'm going to give this a 3.6, actually. 3.6. I think it's pretty strong. Greenside Watcher is 1 and a green for a 2/1 elf druid. You can tap it to untap target gate. Well, that's not great. It's certainly no Arbor Elf that is untapping target forest, which you can get a little bit more value out of. Gate means that, I guess it doesn't 100% mean that you are playing multicolor, because you can play other types of gates too, like the Basilisk Gate. That doesn't give you colors, but and that can be kind of cool, because then the Basilisk Gate can potentially pump multiple times. I don't hate that, but Gates decks and Elf decks are very separate decks, and there's not really any overlap between them. And this card is trying to say there could be, and I just don't think there is. I don't think you want. It is kind of a 2-mana dork. The power doesn't really feel good, because you're mostly going to be untapping the creature, or tapping the creature to untap the land, so you're never really using the power of it anyway. No, it's I don't think this is a very good card, and I will give it a 2.2 to reflect that. Karu Dreadmaw is 4 and a black for a 4/4 zombie crocodile. Great creature types. It's got Defender, and for 1 and a green, you can sacrifice another creature, and you gain life equal to the sacrificed creature's toughness. Kind of cool to have a repeatable sacrifice outlet, especially one that gains you a bunch of life, potentially. That could be pretty useful against some really aggressive decks like Mono Red Madness. The Defender is a little rough. I'm already spending 5 mana on this creature. 4/4 is good stats, but it's not amazing stats. Would this thing being able to attack really be all that bad? I'm not sure. I mean, I guess you get it from a flavor perspective. This thing is in some hole, so it's not really able to attack. Its whole deal is to just throw things into this pit and have them be sacrificed. So, I guess it makes a certain amount of sense. But it doesn't make the card any better. It just makes the flavor work. I just don't. I don't think there's enough value here. You have to play these 2 colors to be able to make this work. If it was just mono black, it still probably wouldn't be great. We have so many good sacrifice outlets in black. Yeah, I don't think this is quite there. We're gonna go for a 2.1. Maybe a 2.2. I don't know. I kind of want 2.1. I just don't think the value is going to be there with the Defender. Spined Bashers, 2 and a black for a 3/1 zombie beast with morph for 2 and a black. You may cast this card face down as a 2/2 creature for 3. Turn it face up anytime for its morph cost. So you can spend. So I'm spending 3 mana to make it a 2/2. That's what a morph does. And then I have to spend its exact mana cost to flip it over at some point to make it a 3/1. Why? Or I could just play it as a 3/1 to begin with. I mean, the reason you do this is, maybe your opponent doesn't block, or they block with a 3 toughness creature, and now I can flip this guy over and either get in with 3 damage instead of getting in with 2 damage, or I can trade with their creature that they didn't expect to die. I mean, they should expect it to die if you're using morph creatures. I always just assume it's the worst thing possible that can be unmorphed like that. So I kind of just treat those things as kill on sight, even though a lot of morph cards aren't really that good. There's not a bunch of morph stuff that shows up in the Pauper format. This is really bad though. This is so much mana. Imagine paying twice. You're paying 6 mana to get a 3/1 on the board. A vanilla 3/1. No, this is a 1. This is a pretty classic 1. Think about all the mana that you're spending. Even if you ignore all of this stuff, you're still paying 3 mana for a 3/1, and that's not very good stats either. We can get better stats out of black creatures for 2 mana. Most of them will have some kind of downside, but not as bad as this. We have a 2 mana. I was actually just looking at it today because a commenter asked about black creatures. They were looking at the video we did on the is it like Hassan Ogre or something like that, and they were asking about creatures with black creatures that are 2 mana that have 3 power, and if there were any that I liked. And one of the ones I saw that I thought was kind of cool, Minstrosity. Yeah, Minstrosity. This is just a 2 mana 3/1, so it's like the thing we saw, except it's 1 point of mana cost lower. And when it dies, you create a food token. So this is all upside. What's this? This is nothing. So yeah, I feel pretty comfortable giving this the 1. I don't like this card at all. I mean, it is a zombie. I guess that might make a difference, but it probably won't. Vibrant Cityscape is a land. You can tap it and sack it to search your library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. We saw this through Spider-Man, and also got Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles version. This is just another Terramorphic Expanse or another Evolving Wilds, another city. No, escape tunnel. Escape tunnel. That's the one. Escape tunnel's better than this. I gotta spell Tunnel de Escape. Yeah, exactly. No, let's get the English one. Escape tunnel. Escape tunnel is the exact same thing, except it also has the ability to make a creature with power 2 or less unblockable that turn. And it's also in the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles set. I mean, this is in the Eternal set, so this is not, it's in standard because it's part of Marvel, but it's not. It doesn't matter. You're not running 12 Evolving Wild style effects in your deck, and you very much don't need this, but it's just as good as an Evolving Wilds or a Terramorphic Expanse. So if you want to play with one that's an arcade, I guess you have that option available to you. I probably would not do that. And also I would play the Escape Tunnels over any of these cards, because the Escape Tunnels have that extra value. And I don't think you necessarily want more than 4 Escape Tunnels. I don't think you even want 4 Escape Tunnels in your deck. So most of these fetch lands don't quite work for me in the Pauper format. And we also just have a ton of other better fetch lands too. The landscapes generally do a better job than any of these cards do. But these aren't bad. I mean, just generally out there, an Evolving Wilds from like a commander perspective is a pretty solid card. But I think our baseline has just gone up a little higher than these things. From the Pauper perspective, it's still a land that goes and fetches any basic you need, and that can be pretty good for fixing. I'll still give it a 7, but I don't want to give it more than that because there's just better lands out there. Let's do a bonus card. Call it a day. We'll end on Ghoul Caller's Bell. Single mana for an artifact. You can tap it, and each player mills a card. Whew, that is not a lot, is it? Milling a card yourself can be okay. If you're playing Dredge or you're playing something that cares about having a lot of flashback, or I don't know. There's things that you might want in your own graveyard. I generally don't like mill in Pauper because there are so many graveyard strategies in Pauper decks and the Pauper meta that I really don't want to enable my opponent's game plan further. And there's a big difference between mill and discard. I mean, I love Refurbished Familiar, one of my favorite creatures in the Pauper format, a very feared and sometimes hated card in the Pauper format. I enjoy it quite a bit. Discard is good because it takes cards out of their hand, the things that they can possibly play. Milling, I mean, takes away the possibility of them playing it from their hand, but it doesn't actually change their hand. So they have just as many options, and they're still going to draw a new card regardless the next turn. So I don't think mill is quite as good of a strategy. It's really not good when you're doing it just one at a time. You need to have some big burst mill if you're going to do that, which is why something like persistent petitioners can work in Pauper, but those are, you're milling them for 12 each time. And, it doesn't take a whole lot of those before your opponent can't do much of anything else. So I think this is pretty bad. I don't think it's good enough for you because it's only milling one card, and it's certainly not bad enough for the opponent by only milling one card. I think this is like a 1.5, and it's kind of trappy in that way. I think if you think this is useful for your deck, there's almost assuredly 20 other better options for you that can self mill or mill your opponent way better than this. We'll call that a day. We'll see you on the next one. Bye.